The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything for Do-yeon Park. He was sitting in his small apartment in Busan, drinking cheap coffee and watching the rain fall against his window. The apartment was nothing special. Just a bed, a desk covered in engineering books, and a small kitchen where he made his meals alone. Do-yeon was 28 years old, worked as an environmental engineer at a water treatment plant, and had never done anything remarkable in his life. Then the hologram appeared in the middle of his room. It was bright blue and shaped like a perfect sphere. A voice spoke from it, deep and ancient, speaking in a language Do-yeon had never heard before. But somehow, he understood every word. Do-yeon Park of Earth, you have been selected to represent your species in the Galactic Union survival trials. You will report to the Seoul spaceport in 48 hours. Failure to appear will result in humanity losing its candidacy for Union membership. This is not optional. Sphere vanished. Do-yeon sat there for a long time, his coffee growing cold in his hands. He had heard about the Galactic Union, of course. Everyone had. 3 years ago, alien ships had appeared in Earth's skies, and everything humanity thought it knew about the universe had changed forever. The aliens were real. They had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for humans to develop enough technology to be worth talking to. The Galactic Union was a collection of thousands of species from across the galaxy. They traded with each other, shared technology, and maintained peace through a complex system of laws and agreements. Earth wanted to join. Being a member would mean access to technology that could solve every problem humanity faced. Clean energy, medicine that could cure any disease. Ships that could travel between stars in days instead of years. But joining was not easy. Every species had to prove its worth. And one of the ways to do that was through the survival trials. Do-yeon had heard stories about the trials. They were ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The rules were simple. Candidates from different species would be dropped on a dangerous planet with nothing but basic tools. They would have to survive for a set amount of time. Those who lived earned glory for their species. Those who died were forgotten. Why had they chosen him? Do-yeon was nobody. He was not a soldier or an athlete or a scientist. He was just a man who knew how to clean dirty water. He thought about running. He thought about hiding. But the message had been clear. If he did not go, humanity would lose its chance at Union membership. Billions of people were counting on him, and they did not even know it. So Do-yeon packed a small bag, said goodbye to no one because there was no one to say goodbye to, and took the train to Seoul. The spaceport was chaos. Thousands of people had gathered outside the gates, held back by soldiers in black uniforms. News drones flew overhead, their cameras pointed at the massive alien ship that sat in the middle of the runway. It was shaped like a teardrop, silver and smooth. No visible windows or doors. Do-yeon showed his identification to the guards, and they let him through. He walked across the empty runway toward the ship, feeling very small and very alone. A door opened in the side of the ship. Though Do-yeon had not seen any seams in the metal before, light poured out, warm and golden, and he stepped inside. The interior of the ship was nothing like he expected. It was organic, almost alive, with walls that curved and pulsed like the inside of a giant creature. Other beings stood in the central chamber, and Do-yeon realized he was looking at aliens for the first time in his life. There was a creature that looked like a giant insect, standing on 6 legs with a hard shell that gleamed like polished metal. Its eyes were compound, made of thousands of tiny lenses that all turned to look at Do-yeon as he entered. Next to it stood a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin like rough stone. Its face was flat and broad, with small eyes set deep in its skull. Muscles rippled under its gray skin as it shifted its weight. A delicate creature floated nearby, its body thin and translucent, with leaves growing from its shoulders and back. It seemed to glow faintly, as if sunlight was passing through it. There were others, too. A small furry being no bigger than a cat, with huge ears and nervous eyes. A snake-like creature that coiled around a support beam. A being made of what looked like living crystal, its body catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. 12 candidates in total, 12 species. And Doyan was the only human. A new being entered the chamber. It was not solid like the others. Instead, it looked like a blob of clear jelly, constantly shifting and reforming. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. I am Overseer Quill. I will be administering the survival trials. You have been chosen by your governments to represent your species. Some of you volunteered. Some of you did not. It does not matter. You are here now. The Overseer floated to the center of the room. Trials will take place on Nexera 7, a Category 5 death world. The atmosphere contains sulfur compounds, methane, and acidic particles. Temperatures range from extreme heat during the day to extreme cold at night. The native fauna are aggressive and territorial. Many species cannot survive there for more than a few minutes without protection. Doyan felt his stomach drop. A death world. He was going to die on an alien planet, far from home, and no one would ever know what happened to him. He will be given no advanced technology, Quillen continued. No weapons, no environmental suits, no communication devices. You will have only the clothes you wear and basic survival tools. A knife, canteen, a fire-starting kit, and a length of rope. Your natural abilities and your intelligence are all that will save you. The massive four-armed being made a sound like grinding rocks. How long must we survive? 48 hours. 2 full rotations of Nexera 7. Those who are still alive when the time ends will be retrieved. Those who are not will be left where they fall. Doyan looked around at his competitors. The insect being had natural armor. The four-armed giant had incredible strength. The plant creature could probably survive without food or water. Even the small furry being probably had some hidden ability that made it dangerous. What did Doyan have? Soft skin that burned in the sun and froze in the cold. Lungs that needed clean air to breathe. A body that was slow, weak, and fragile compared to almost every other being in the room. He was going to die. He was certain of it. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he did not know existed, something stirred. It was not bravery. It was not confidence. It was something older than that. Something that had kept his ancestors alive. Through ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them, it was stubbornness. Pure, simple, human stubbornness. Doyan did not know if he could survive. But he knew he was not going to give up without trying. The ship began to move. And Doyan watched through a suddenly transparent wall as Earth grew smaller and smaller behind them. His home, his world. He might never see it again, but he would fight. He would struggle. He would use every trick his species had learned in its long climb from the mud to the stars. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Far above Earth. On a research station that orbited the planet, a woman named Minji Kung watched the alien ship depart. She was a xenobiologist, one of the few humans who had been allowed to study alien life forms. And she had been given a special assignment to monitor the human candidate during the trials. She pulled up Doyan's file on her screen. An environmental engineer. Nothing special. No military training, no survival experience, no remarkable physical abilities. They are going to eat him alive, her assistant said. Minji did not respond. She was reading something in his file, something that had caught her attention. A note from his professors at university. It said, Park Do-yeon does not give up. When faced with an impossible problem, he does not walk away. He finds another way. Minji leaned back in her chair. Maybe, she said quietly. Or maybe they have no idea what they are dealing with. The drop pod hit the ground hard, and Do-yeon's teeth slammed together with enough force to make him see stars. For a moment, he just sat there in the dark, breathing heavily, waiting for his head to stop spinning. The pod was small, barely big enough for him to fit inside. The walls were already growing warm from the planet's heat. A hiss of air, and the pod opened like a flower blooming. Yellow light flooded in, and with it came the smell. It was like nothing Do-yeon had ever experienced. Rotten eggs, mixed with burning plastic, mixed with something sharp and chemical that made his eyes water immediately. He coughed hard and stumbled out of the pod onto the rocky ground. HFY-7. Stretched out before him, the sky was the color of infection, a sickly yellow-green that seemed to press down on everything below it. The ground was black rock, cracked and broken, with pools of liquid that bubbled and steamed. Strange plants grew in clusters, but they were not green like earth plants. They were red and orange and purple, and they moved even though there was no wind. The air was thick. Doyan could feel it coating his throat with every breath, leaving a taste like metal on his tongue. Already his lungs were starting to burn. This is bad, he thought. This is very, very bad. He checked his supplies. A knife with a short blade, a canteen full of water, a small kit with flint and steel for making fire, a length of thin rope, and the clothes on his back, a simple shirt, pants, and boots. No mask. No filter. No protection at all from the poisonous air. In the distance, Doyan could hear sounds. Some of them were the normal sounds of a planet. Wind, the crack of cooling rock, the bubble of those strange pools. But other sounds were worse. Screams, roars, the crash of something large. Falling to the ground, the other candidates were out there somewhere. And from the sound of it, they were already dying. Doyan took another breath, and this time the burn was worse. He could feel the acidic particles in the air eating at the soft tissue of his lungs. If he kept breathing like this, he would be dead within an hour. Think, he told himself. Think, you are an engineer. You solve problems. Solve this one. He looked at the air around him. The yellow fog was thickest near the ground, where the sulfur compounds were heaviest. Higher up it seemed slightly clearer, but he could not fly. He could not hold his breath for 48 hours. He needed another solution. His grandmother's face appeared in his mind. She had grown up in a small town near a factory that made chemicals. The air there had been bad, especially on hot days when the pollution sat low over the houses like a blanket. She had told him stories about how people survived before the government cleaned up the factories. We put cloths over our faces, she had said. Wet cloths. The water caught the bad things in the air before they got into our lungs. It was not perfect, but it was enough. Doyan looked down at his shirt. It was cotton, plain and simple. He grabbed the bottom of it and tore, ripping a long strip of fabric free. Then he opened his canteen and poured water over the cloth until it was soaked. He tied the wet cloth around his nose and mouth, covering as much of his face as he could. The fabric pressed against his skin, damp and uncomfortable. Then he took a breath. The air still tasted bad. It still burned a little. But the worst of it, the sharp chemical bite that had been tearing at his lungs, was reduced. The wet cloth was catching the particles, filtering them out before they could do their damage. It was not perfect, but it was enough. Doyan laughed, a short and surprised sound that was muffled by the mask. He was still alive. Against all odds, against all logic, he was still alive. A sound made him turn. Something was coming toward him through the yellow fog, stumbling and crashing. It was big, much bigger than Doyan. For a moment, he thought it was one of the planet's predators come to eat him. Then the figure emerged from the fog. Doyan saw that it was one of the other candidates. The four-armed giant. The one with the stone-like skin. But something was wrong with it. Its movements were jerky and uncontrolled. Its small eyes were wide with panic, and it was clutching at its throat with all four of its hands. Cannot breathe. The giant gasped. Its voice was like boulders grinding together, but now it was weak and broken. Air, poison, burning. Doyan realized what was happening. The giant species had evolved on a different world with different air. Their respiratory system was sensitive, designed for clean atmosphere. The toxic air of Nexera 7 was destroying them from the inside. The giant fell to its knees. Its stone skin was starting to crack, dark fluid seeping from the gaps. It looked up at Doyan with dying eyes. Help me. Doyan hesitated for only a second. Then he tore another strip from his shirt, wet it with water, and pressed it against the giant's face. Breathe through this, he said. Slowly, the cloth will filter the worst of it. The giant took a shaky breath. Then another. Then another. The panic in its eyes started to fade, replaced by confusion. What is this? It asked. A mask, Doyan said. A very old human trick. The giant stared at him. You are helping me? Why? We are competitors. If I die, you have better chance of winning. Doyan shrugged. You asked for help? Where I come from, when someone asks for help, you give it. He helped the giant to its feet. The creature was heavy, but not as heavy as Doyan expected. Perhaps its stone skin was not as dense as it looked. I am Tarn, the giant said. Of the Crothian people? Doyan? Human? Human. Tarn said the word slowly, as if tasting it. My people know of humans. You are new to the galaxy. Small, soft, weak. He paused. But you are still alive? And my father is not. Your father? Goroth. He was the strongest warrior of our clan. He entered the trials to bring glory to our family. Tarn's voice grew heavy. I heard him die. Through the fog, the air took him before he could take a single step. Doyan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's temperature. If a Crothian warrior, strong and armored, could die so quickly, what chance did any of them have? But he was still alive. And now, Tarn was still alive. 2 survivors in a world designed to kill them. We should move, Doyan said. Find higher ground. The air might be better up there? Tarn nodded. And shelter. Night comes soon. The cold will be as deadly as the air. They started walking, the human and the giant, moving through the yellow fog together. Behind them, more screams echoed across the landscape. More candidates were dying. The trials were living up to their terrible reputation. But Doyan was not thinking about glory anymore. He was not thinking about the Galactic Union or humanity's future. He was thinking about the next breath, the next step, the next moment of survival. That was all that mattered now. Stay alive. Keep moving. Find a way. It was what humans had always done, since the first of them had walked out of the African plains and into a world full of predators and dangers. They had not been the strongest or the fastest. They had not had claws or fangs or poison, but they had been stubborn. They had been clever, and they had refused, absolutely refused. Tididone adjusted his wet cloth mask and kept walking into the yellow hell of Ni-XARA-7, far above the planet. On the observation station, Ingi Kong watched the biosigns of the candidates flash across her screen. 8 of the 12 were already dead. Their bodies had shut down within minutes of exposure to the atmosphere. Species that had conquered entire star systems, that had built empires and fought wars, and considered themselves the masters of creation, had died choking on air. But 2 signals were steady. One was Crothian, the other was human. Asked Overseer Quilm. The gelatinous being had come to the observation deck to watch the trials personally. The human has no natural protection, no adaptation to hostile environments. How is he still alive? Mingy pointed to the visual feed. Through the fog, they could barely see Doyan and Tarn walking together, both with cloth wrapped around their faces. He made a mask, she said. From his own clothing? A mask? That simple cloth is keeping him alive? It is filtering the worst of the particulates. Not perfectly, but enough. Minji allowed herself a small smile. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. During plagues, during dust storms, during industrial disasters. When the air tries to kill us, we put cloth over our faces and keep breathing. Quiln was silent for a long moment. This was not anticipated, the overseer finally said. The human was expected to be the first casualty. I know, Minji said. Everyone always underestimates us. They see our soft skin and our small bodies, and they think we are weak. She turned back to the screen, watching the tiny figure of Doyan walking through the poison fog. They forget that weakness forces you to think, and humans have been thinking our way out of death for a very, very long time. The twin suns of Nexura 7 began to set, and Dojan watched the sky turn from yellow to orange to a deep, angry red. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching a wound bleed across the heavens. "We need to find shelter," Tarn said. The Crothion was still holding the wet cloth to his face, though his stone skin had stopped cracking. "When the suns go down, the temperature will drop. Fast." Doyan asked. "My people studied this world before the trials. During the day, temperatures reach 40 degrees above freezing. At night, they fall to 40 degrees below. The change happens within 1 hour." Doyan did the math in his head. An 80-degree drop in 60 minutes. His body could not handle that. Neither could Tarn's, despite his tough exterior. They had been walking for hours, moving uphill toward a ridge of black mountains in the distance. The air was slightly better here, less thick with poison, but Doyan's lungs still ached with every breath. His mask was filthy now, stained yellow and brown from the particles it had caught. "There," Tarn said, pointing with one of his upper arms. A cave. It was more of a crack in the rock than a proper cave, a narrow opening in the side of a cliff that led into darkness. But it was shelter. It was protection from the wind that was already starting to blow colder. They climbed inside. The space was small, barely big enough for both of them to sit. The walls were rough and sharp, and Doyan cut his hand on a jutting edge as he settled into position. "This will protect us from the wind," Tarn said. "But not from the cold. We will freeze before morning." Doyan did not respond. He was looking around the cave, studying everything he could see. The walls were rock, yes, but there were also dried plants wedged into the cracks. Dead vegetation that had blown in from outside over years and years. "Help me gather this," he said, pulling at the dry leaves and stems. "All of it." Tarn looked confused, but did as Doyan asked. They pulled handfuls of dead plant material from the walls and piled it in the center of the cave floor. "Now what?" Tarn asked. Duhayan pulled out his fire-starting kit. Flint and steel, simple tools that any human child could use. He struck them together, once, twice, 3 times. Sparks flew onto the pile of vegetation. Nothing happened. The plants were dry, but not dry enough. They needed something else. Doyan thought for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper that had come with his canteen. Instructions, written in a language he could not read. He crumpled it into a ball and placed it at the center of the pile. This time, when he struck the flint, the paper caught. A tiny flame appeared, orange and flickering. Dajan bent low and blew gently, feeding the flame with his breath. The fire grew. It spread to the dry plants. Within minutes, a proper fire was burning in the center of the cave. Tarn stared at it with an expression Doyan could not read. "What is this?" the Crothian asked. "This. Dancing light?" "Fire," Doyan said. "Controlled combustion. It will keep us warm through the night." "Fire, Tarn," said the word slowly. "My people do not have this. We have heat sources, yes? Machines that warm our ships and our homes. But we do not. Create heat from nothing. It is not nothing. It is just chemistry. Fuel, air, and a spark. Everything else happens on its own." The temperature outside was already dropping. Doyun could feel the cold creeping into the cave, pressing against his skin like a physical force. But the fire pushed back. It created a bubble of warmth around them, a small safe space in the middle of a frozen hell. Hours passed. The fire burned low, and Doyan fed it more vegetation, keeping it alive. Tarn had fallen into a kind of half-sleep, his stone skin folding in on itself for protection. But Doyan stayed awake, watching the entrance of the cave. Sometime after midnight, he heard sounds, footsteps, voices. He grabbed his knife and moved to the entrance. In the darkness outside, lit only by the faint glow of distant stars, he could see shapes approaching. 3 of them. Small, moving slowly. "Who is there?" He called out. The shapes stopped. Then one of them spoke, a clicking sound that somehow translated itself in Doyan's mind. "Please," the voice said. "We saw the light. We are cold." So cold. Doyan hesitated. These were his competitors. Every one of them that died meant a better chance of survival for him. The logical thing, the smart thing, would be to send them away. Let the cold take them. Save his resources for himself. But that was not who he was. That was not what humans were. "Come inside," he said. "There is room." The three figures stumbled into the cave. The first was the insect being, the one with the armored shell. Up close, Do-young could see that the shell was cracked in several places, damaged by the toxic air or the rough terrain. The creature clicked her mandibles in what might have been gratitude. "I am Chicket," she said. "Vilari species." The second was the plant creature, the one that had glowed faintly on the ship. Now the glow was almost gone, and the leaves on its body were wilted and brown. "Bloom," it whispered. "Of the sulfury, the cold. It stops my processes. I cannot make energy. I am dying." Do-young guided Bloom closer to the fire. The plant creature reached out its thin hands toward the flames, soaking in the heat. "Better," Bloom said. "This is better." The third figure was tiny, barely reaching Do-young's knee. It was the small, furry being from the ship, with the huge ears and nervous eyes. It had not spoken since entering the cave. It just sat in the corner, shivering. "That is Pip," Chicket explained. "Of the Makari. He does not speak much. His species communicates through sound frequencies that most others cannot hear." Pip looked up at Do-young with those huge eyes. There was something in that gaze that Do-young recognized. Fear. Deep, primal fear. The fear of a small creature in a big, dangerous world. Do-young reached out slowly and placed his hand on Pip's head, scratching gently behind those enormous ears. Pip froze for a moment. Then slowly he leaned into the touch. "It is okay," Do-young said quietly. "You are safe now." Tarn had woken up during the commotion. He was staring at Do-young with those small, deep-set eyes. "I do not understand you, human," the Crothian said. "These beings are your competitors. Their survival reduces your chances. Why do you help them?" Do-young thought about the question. He thought about his grandmother, who had helped her neighbors during the hard times, even when she had barely enough for herself. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to exhaustion to give Do-young a better life. He thought about all the stories of human history, the ones that were not about war and conquest, but about people coming together to survive impossible odds. "Because this is what we do," he finally said. "Humans are not strong. We are not fast. We cannot fly or breathe underwater or survive in the vacuum of space. But we figured out, a long time ago, that we survive better together than alone. One human is weak. A group of humans is dangerous." Chicket clicked thoughtfully. "You see us as part of your group. I see you as people who need help. That is enough." The fire crackled and popped. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen landscape, carrying temperatures that would kill any of them in minutes. But inside the cave, warm and safe, 5 survivors huddled together. They were not friends. They were not allies. They were competitors in a contest designed to separate the strong from the weak. But tonight, at least they were something else. They were a tribe. A tiny, impossible tribe made of beings from different worlds, different species, different lives. United by nothing except a human, a fire, and the shared desire to see the morning. Do-young fed more fuel to the flames and watched the sparks rise toward the ceiling. "Get some sleep," he said. "I will keep watch." Tarn shook his massive head. "You need rest too, human. I will rest when we are safe. We may never be safe." Do-young smiled behind his dirty mask. "Then I will rest when I am dead." He meant it as a joke. But looking at the faces around the fire, he realized it was also a promise. He would keep them alive. All of them. Not because he had to. Not because it helped his chances, but because it was right. On the observation station, Linga Kong was the only one still awake. The other researchers had gone to sleep hours ago, convinced that the trials would play out the same way they always did. The strong would survive. The weak would die. But Minji could not stop watching. On her screen, 5 life signs pulsed steadily. 5 candidates gathered around a tiny point of heat in the middle of a frozen wasteland. 5 species that had never worked together, never trusted each other, never had any reason to cooperate, and at the center of it all, a human. A small, soft, unremarkable human who was somehow holding them all together. "What are you?" Minji whispered to the screen. "What are we?" She did not have an answer. But she was starting to think that the galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity, something important. Dawn came slowly to Nexo 7. The twin suns rising like angry eyes over the black mountains. The cold retreated, replaced by the creeping heat that would soon make the planet feel like an oven. But for a brief moment, in the early morning light, the world was almost bearable. Doyon had not slept. He had spent the entire night feeding the fire, checking on his companions, and thinking. Always thinking? They had survived the atmosphere. They had survived the cold. But there was something else out there, something that worried him more than poison air or freezing temperatures. The predators. He had heard them during the night. Distant sounds that echoed across the landscape. Heavy footsteps. Low growls. The crack of breaking rock. Something big was out there. Many somethings. "We need to move," he told the others as they woke up. "Find a more defensible position." Tarn stretched his forearms, joints popping like cracking stone. "What about the creatures?" "The Ravagers. I have seen the files on them. They are apex predators. 8 legs, armored hide, jaws that can crush metal. We cannot fight them." "Then we do not fight them," Doyon said. "We make ourselves too much trouble to eat." Chicket clicked her mandibles. "Explain." "Predators are not stupid. They want easy meals. If we look dangerous enough, if we make it clear that attacking us will cost them more than it is worth, they will find easier prey. And if they do not..." Doyon picked up a long stick that had been part of their fire fuel. He began stripping the bark with his knife, revealing the hard wood beneath. "Then we hurt them so badly that they regret their choice." They left the cave as a group, moving carefully across the rocky terrain. Pip rode on Tarn's shoulder, his huge ears swiveling constantly, listening for danger. Chicket walked point, her armored body the first line of defense against anything they might encounter. Bloom floated at the back, gathering strength from the rising suns. Her glow slowly returning, Doyon walked in the middle. Thinking. Planning. He had found a small cliff the day before. A rise of rock with a sheer drop on one side and a narrow approach on the other. If they could reach it, they would have a position that was almost impossible to attack. One way in, one way out, and a long fall for anything that tried to approach from behind. They were halfway there when Pip's ears went flat against his head. "Something comes," Chicket said, translating the Makari's silent warning. "Many somethings, fast." Doyon looked around. They were in an open area, a flat stretch of black rock with no cover, no shelter. Nothing but empty space all around them. Bad, very bad. "Form up," he said. "Tarn, you are in front." Chicket, to his left. Bloom behind them. Pip on Tarn's shoulder. "Do not move unless I tell you." "What about you?" Tarn asked. "I will be wherever I am needed." They came from the east, rising out of a depression in the ground like nightmares crawling out of the earth. Ravagers. 6 of them. Each one was the size of a small car, with 8 legs that ended in curved claws and a head that was mostly mouth. Their eyes were small and red, set above jaws lined with teeth as long as Doyon's fingers. They spread out as they approached, circling the group like wolves around injured prey. One of them, the largest, moved to the front. The pack leader. It opened its mouth and let out a sound that was half roar, half scream. Doyon's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his teeth. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to run, to flee, to get as far away from these monsters as possible. But he did not run. He could not run. If he ran, they would all die. "Nobody move," he said, his voice steady despite his terror. "They are testing us, trying to see if we will panic." The pack leader took a step closer, then another. Its red eyes were fixed on Tarn, the largest member of their group. Sizing him up. Deciding if he was worth the effort, Doyen picked up 2 rocks from the ground. They were not much, just chunks of black stone that fit in his palms. But they were better than nothing. He smashed them together as hard as he could. The crack echoed across the landscape like thunder. All 6 ravagers flinched, their ears flattening against their skulls. The pack leader hissed and took a step back. Again, Doyen shouted, "Everyone, make noise!" Tarn roared, a sound like an avalanche. Chicket clicked her mandibles together in a rapid rhythm that sounded like a machine gun. Bloom began to glow brighter, humming at a frequency that made the air vibrate. Even Pip contributed, opening his mouth and releasing a sound that Doyen could not hear, but that made the ravagers shake their heads in discomfort. Doyen kept smashing his rocks together, over and over, filling the air with sharp, unexpected sounds. He advanced toward the pack leader, step by step, making himself as big and loud as possible. "Go," he shouted at the creature. "We are not worth it. Find something else." The pack leader snarled, showing those terrible teeth. For a moment, Doyen was sure it was going to attack anyway. Sure that his plan had failed. Sure that he was about to die. Then the creature turned and ran. The rest of the pack followed, scattering across the landscape like shadows fleeing from light. Within seconds, they were gone. Disappearing into the yellow fog that still hung in the low areas, Doyen let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. His hands were shaking. His legs felt like water. He sat down hard on the ground and just breathed. "Human," Tarn said, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. "What did you do?" "Scared them," Doyen managed. "Predators expect prey to run. When prey fights back, when it is loud and aggressive and confident, predators get confused. They start to wonder if maybe the prey knows something they do not. But you were not actually dangerous." "They did not know that," Doyen laughed weakly. "Half of survival is making your enemies believe you are more trouble than you are worth." Chicket approached him, her compound eyes studying his face. "Where did you learn this? Do humans have natural predators on your world?" "We used to. Millions of years ago. Big cats, wolves, bears. We were not the top of the food chain. We were somewhere in the middle, just another animal trying not to be eaten." "What happened?" Doyen smiled behind his mask. "We learned. We adapted. We figured out that sticks could be weapons and fire could keep the monsters away. We learned to work together, to communicate, to plan. And eventually, we became the most dangerous thing on our planet. Not because we were strong, but because we were smart and stubborn, and absolutely refused to die." They reached the cliff without any more encounters. The position was as good as Doyen had hoped. A flat area at the top with a clear view of the surrounding terrain and only one narrow path leading up. They could see anything coming from kilometers away. Tarn began piling rocks at the entrance of the path, creating a basic wall. Chicket patrolled the perimeter, her instincts demanding that she keep watch. Bloom found a sunny spot and spread her leaves, absorbing as much energy as she could, and Pip sat next to Doyen, pressing against his leg like a pet seeking comfort. "We might actually survive this," Doyen said quietly. "More to himself than anyone else?" "Because of you," Tarn said. The Crothian had finished his wall and was now sitting nearby, all 4 arms crossed over his chest. "You saved us. All of us. The mask, the fire, the strategy against the Ravagers. Without you, we would be dead. You helped too. All of you. We followed your lead. That is different." Doyen thought about this. He had never been a leader before. He had never been special, or important, or heroic. He was just a man who knew how to clean water and solve problems. But maybe that was enough. Maybe being special was not about being strong or fast or powerful. Maybe it was about being the person who saw a problem and refused to give up until it was solved. 12 hours left, Chicket announced. "If we can survive until sunset, we win." Hours. It seemed like nothing. It seemed like forever. But Doyen had survived worse. His species had survived worse. Ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped them out 100 times over? What was 12 more hours? He leaned back against a rock and closed his eyes. For the first time since he had arrived on this terrible planet, he allowed himself to believe that he might actually see Earth again. "Wake me if anything happens," he told the others. "I am going to rest now," surrounded by aliens who had been his enemies and were now something like friends. Do-yeon Park finally slept. The countdown reached 0. Just as the twin suns touched the horizon, Do-yeon stood at the edge of the cliff. Looking out over the hellscape of Nexura 7, the yellow fog was turning golden in the evening light. And for just a moment, the death world looked almost beautiful. 48 hours. They had done it behind him. The others were gathered in a loose circle. Tarn the Crothion, his stone skin scarred but healing. Chikit the Valari, her shell cracked but strong. Bloom the Sylphery, wilted but alive. Pip the Makari, still small and scared, but no longer alone. 5 survivors. 5 species. 1 impossible victory. The rescue ships appeared in the sky like falling stars, burning through the atmosphere in trails of white fire. 3 of them, sleek in silver, each one carrying medical teams and observers. And all the technology that had been denied to them during the trials. The first ship landed on the flat area below the cliff, and a door opened to reveal Overseer Quill. The gelatinous being flowed out of the ship like water, reforming itself on the rocky ground. "The survival trials have concluded," Quillen announced, its voice echoing across the landscape. "Final tally. 5 survivors out of 12 candidates. This is unusual." Do-yeon climbed down from the cliff, followed by the others. His legs were tired, his lungs ached, and his skin was covered in cuts and burns from 2 days of fighting to stay alive. But he was standing. That was what mattered. "Unusual how?" he asked. Quillen studied him with whatever senses a gelatinous being used to perceive the world. "The survival trials have been conducted for over 10,000 years. In that time, the average number of survivors has been 2. The highest number ever recorded was 3. You have achieved 5. We worked together. Yes, that is what is unusual. The trials are designed to test individual survival, competition, the ability of a single being to overcome impossible odds through their own strength and abilities. Cooperation is not expected." Chiquette stepped forward, her mandibles clicking. "Perhaps your trials are testing the wrong thing." Quillen rotated to face her. "Explain. You wanted to see who was strongest? Who could survive alone against a hostile world? But survival is not about being alone. It is about knowing when to ask for help and when to give it." The human understood this. He did not try to win by letting us die. He tried to win by keeping us alive. That is an inefficient strategy. Is it? Tarn's voice rumbled like distant thunder. 5 of us are standing here. 7 of the others are dead. Dead because they tried to survive alone. Dead because they saw us as enemies instead of allies. The humans saw us as people, and that is why we live. Quillen was silent for a long moment. The gelatinous being seemed to be thinking, processing, trying to understand something that did not fit into its ancient calculations. Finally it spoke. "The official results will be recorded as a 5-way tie. Each of you will bring honor to your species. Each of you will be credited with victory." Lou made a sound like wind through leaves. "All of us? Equally? Yes, this is unprecedented, but the rules do not forbid it. You all survived. You all win." Do-yeon shook his head. "I do not want credit. I did not do this for glory then." "Why?" Quillen asked. "Why help your competitors? Why share your knowledge, your fire, your strategies? You could have let them die. You would have been the sole survivor, the hero of your species." It was a good question. Do-yeon had been asking it himself for 2 days. Why had he helped them? Why had he risked his own survival to save beings he had never met, from species he had never known existed? The answer came to him slowly, rising from somewhere deep inside. "Because that is not who I want to be," he said. "I do not want to be the person who watches others die when I could have helped. I do not want to win by stepping on the bodies of people I could have saved. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe that makes me stupid. But I would rather die as someone who tried to help than live as someone who only helped himself. He pulled the dirty cloth mask from his face and held it up. It was just a strip of cotton, torn from his shirt, stained yellow and brown from 2 days of filtering poison air. "This is not special," he said. "It is just cloth. Any of you could have made one if you had known how. But you did not know, and I did. So I shared, because knowledge that is not shared is worthless. Because survival that only saves one person is not really survival at all." Quillen absorbed this. Then, slowly, the gelatinous being made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human," it said. "Your species is young. You have been traveling between stars for only a few of your years. Many in the Galactic Union thought you were primitive, insignificant, a minor species that would never amount to anything. And now I think they are wrong." Quillen floated closer to Dojan, studying him with new interest. "You are not the strongest species. You are not the fastest or the most resilient. But you have something that many older species have forgotten. You have hope. The belief that things can be better. That cooperation is stronger than competition. That helping others is not weakness, but strength. We call it humanity," Dojan said. "Being human is not about what you are. It is about how you choose to act." The rescue teams had emerged from the ships now, approaching with medical equipment and warm blankets. Doyen's companions were being led away for treatment, but they all looked back at him as they went. Tarn raised one of his massive hands in a gesture of farewell. Chicket clicked her mandibles in what Doyan had learned to recognize as gratitude. Bloom glowed warmly, and Pip made a sound that somehow translated to thank you. Dojan watched them go. These beings who had been strangers 2 days ago, who had been competitors, enemies, obstacles in his path to survival. They were friends now. Maybe the only real friends he had ever had? Human. Quillen had not left. The overseer was still floating beside him, watching the medical team's work. "May I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Are you afraid?" Doyon considered the question. "Of what?" "Of everything. Of the galaxy. Of the universe. Of all the dangers and challenges that wait for your species as you move out into the stars. Are you afraid?" He thought about his grandmother who had survived pollution and poverty and never stopped smiling. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to exhaustion and called it love. He thought about all the humans who had come before him, facing ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters, always finding a way to keep going, as he said. "I am afraid. We are always afraid. But we do not let the fear stop us. We feel it, acknowledge it, and then we do what needs to be done anyway. That is maybe the most human thing of all. Being scared and doing it anyway?" Quillen made that laughing sound again. "I think I am beginning to understand your species, human. And I think the galaxy should be very glad that you have decided to help rather than harm. Because if you ever turned that stubbornness, that creativity, that refusal to die, toward destruction instead of survival. We have," Doyan admitted. "Many times, we are not perfect. We have done terrible things to ourselves and to our world. But we are trying to be better. Every generation tries to be a little better than the one before. And do you succeed?" Doyan looked up at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there was Earth, his home, the small blue world that had produced his species and sent them out into the universe. "Sometimes," he said, "sometimes we fail, but we always try. And as long as we keep trying, there is hope." The medical team finally reached him, wrapping him in blankets and checking his vital signs. He let them lead him toward the ship, toward warmth and safety, and the long journey home. But before he stepped inside, he turned back to look at Nexra 7 one last time. The death world that had been designed to kill him. The hell planet that had taken 7 lives and nearly taken 5 more. He had beaten it. Not through strength or speed or natural armor, but through cloth and fire and the simple human belief that helping others was never a waste. That was what humanity was. Not the best species. Not the strongest or the smartest. But the species that refused to give up. The species that found a way, The species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today," Du-Hyun smiled as the ship door closed behind him. In the months that followed, the story of the survival trials spread across the Galactic Union, not as a tale of strength or power, but as something new. A story about a human who had turned competition into cooperation, who had saved his enemies and made them friends, who had won not by fighting, but by helping. And when other species faced impossible challenges, when they encountered problems that seemed unsolvable, they started to ask a new question. What would the humans do? The answer was always the same. Find a way. Work together. Refuse to give up. And slowly, one story at a time, the galaxy began to learn what humanity had known all along, that the greatest strength was not in muscles or armor or weapons. It was in the simple decision to help, to hope, to be human. The end.